Apologize for that, you guys. Let's do a roll call right quick. Ray Williams, Rebecca Fincher, self, I'm here, Alexander Bainey,
Present.
Adam Bell,
Here.
Letitia Sanders-Jones,
Present.
Ethan Reed,
Present.
Drew Spurgers,
Here.
Larry Webb, Greg West.
Present.
Thank you. Just a quick note before we get started, any items not approved by the Planning Commission may be appealed to the City Council within 30 days of the date of Planning Commission denial, with the exception of decisions made by the Planning Commission acting as the Board Zoning of Adjustment. Our first item tonight is the request for preliminary plat approval at the Bell Valley Subdivision Phase 5. Do we have anybody here to represent? Oh, thank you. We need to go through and approve the old minutes, guys. Does anybody have any questions about the old minutes at all?
Make a motion to approve.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstaining? Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, so the first item this evening is the request for preliminary approval of the Bell Valley Phase 5 preliminary plat. The applicant is requesting preliminary plat approval of a 67-lot subdivision, which is located on 14.27 acres east of South German Lane. It's approximately 250 feet south of the intersection at Favre Lane. This particular development represents the 5th phase of the Bell Valley subdivision in addition to the small PUD you've approved. The proposed lots range in area from 0.15 acres to 0.32 acres, and this is consistent with lot requirements for the R1 zoning district. The subdivision proposes access from South German Lane, and it will be served by 2 internal residential streets, including, I believe it's Carolyn Lane, or I'm not sure how to pronounce it, which connects this phase to the Phase 4, which is to the south. 2 lots, lots 34 and lot 120, are corner lots, and they have frontage on South German as well as the internal street. But these lots will not be allowed to take access from South German. They'll only take access from the internal street. All proposed streets will require a 5-foot sidewalk with 6.5-foot green space. No waivers have been included as part of this request, and staff does recommend approval of the preliminary plat, contingent upon the completion of the required corrections and all conditions of approval. Any questions?
Is the applicant present?
Frank Shaw, 1315 Main Street, and I'm the applicant, and everything Beth said is accurate, and this will be our final phase over there unless we acquire other properties. So we're about 160 lots in with this completion. Happy to answer any questions. I've read the conditions and the recommendations, and they're all acceptable with us.
Thank you, sir. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Shaw?
Thank you.
All right. I will bring this item back into commission. Anybody have any discussion at all on this matter?
Motion.
Got a motion from Drew. A second, anybody?
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Thank you, Mr. Shaw. All right, the next item here is, see here, the request for waiver, double frontage lot at the Ridgeland subdivision.
Yes. So this is actually a minor subdivision. A minor subdivision is any one that has 4 or fewer lots. But in this particular instance, because it required a waiver to the subdivision regulations, it has to come before you for approval to allow that. So this is a 2-lot minor subdivision. The applicant is requesting approval of the waiver to create a double frontage lot. This action requires your approval. Lot 1 of the subdivision will take access only from the Old Morrilton Highway or Highway 64, but Lot 2 is proposed sort of in an L shape to front on both the Old Morrilton Highway as well as Pike Ridge Road. The applicant has indicated that Pike Ridge Road frontage will primarily be used as a secondary egress. Pike Ridge Road is a substandard local non-residential street. It's approximately 17 feet in width and it's lacking curb and gutter. Additionally, this property is immediately adjacent to I-40 and the very, very steep ridge there, so development potential is very limited at this site, so it's even further likely that this will just be a means of exiting whatever is developed on the site in the future. The comprehensive plan does indicate the area as appropriate for commercial development, so it will allow for appropriate development once the subdivision is complete, and staff does recommend approval of the waiver. Any questions?
Is the applicant present or a representative, please?
Bobby French, 1021 Front Street, representing the owner, and basically what she said. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. French? Thank you, sir. All right, guys, any questions at all about anything?
I move to accept the staff recommendation of approval as it will allow for development that's consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstaining? Motion carries. All right, so now we are entering the section for public hearings. The Conway Planning Commission makes recommendations to the City Council on public hearing items. Items reviewed on this agenda will be considered by the City Council as early as October the 25th of 2022. The way this portion works is someone from staff will read through the recommendations and the different details, and then the applicant will have a chance to speak in favor of 10 minutes. Every other in favor of out there in the audience will have 3-minute opportunity, and then we'll talk to any opposing. Again, that first person gets 10 minutes, and it's 3 minutes after that. Once that's exhausted, it comes back into commission for discussion. Okay. So on this first one, a request to rezone R1 to C3 at 4106 Prince Street.
Okay, so the property in question is actually immediately north of 4106, but it has been identified with 4106 for many years, so that's why we use that address. The applicant is requesting to rezone a 0.1 acre portion of property at the rear of the primary parcel, which is 4106 Prince Street, from R1 to C3. The property is the southernmost portion of Lot 93 of Mallard's Crossing subdivision, so the property at 4106 Prince Street has not been platted, but the other lots have been. The primary parcel at 4106 Prince Street has been zoned C3 since its annexation in 1988. This subject property was separated from the remainder of Lot 93 in 1992 and has been held in common ownership with the 4106 Prince Street property since that time. The property has been used in conjunction with the retailer office use at 4106 Prince Street since at least 2007. And if you see on page 15 in your report, there's some comparison photos so you can see that the state of the property has been the same. The property is fenced and has been used for storage in support of that operation. While the comprehensive plan designates the property for single family, it also designates the fueling station at the corner of Hogan and Prince Street as single family, as well as all of the other office and retail and church uses that are on that same stretch of corridor there. So the comprehensive plan in this instance isn't reliable, okay? The request is the result of a remodeling project and change in ownership at 4106 Prince Street. This process represents an effort to clean up the non-conforming nature of the property. The applicant has a replat in process to actually plat the 4106 Prince Street property, but it cannot be finalized until we determine the outcome of this request. Staff did receive at least one public comment about this request, and it was forwarded to you via email. Staff does recommend approval of the request as it will bring the longstanding use of the property into conformance with the zoning regulations and will not likely harm adjacent property as the use is not intended to change. Any questions?
The public comment that came through, the one that we got today.
So you may have gotten two. I was unaware of the additional comments, so.
Thank you. Do we have anyone here to speak in favor of this?
Hi, Megan Weckworth, 240 Skyline Drive. I'm with the Tyler Group, representing our client who's trying to rezone it and plat it into a single lot. They're just updating the building, and when they pulled the building permit for updating it, it just triggered a couple different things, and so we're just trying to make everything correct.
Is the client planning on doing anything different to this, or it's just to bring it into compliance so that they can do their remodel?
Just bring it into compliance. So they're just updating the building. I don't think they're doing any additions or anything to it.
But do we know the intended use?
Intended use,
Yeah.
sales, I believe. Consulting.
Mhm.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Is there anyone else here to speak in favor of this? Is there any opposing?
My name is Ben South. I reside at 803 Teal Drive, directly across from the northernmost edge of the proposed rezoning. I really think this is a problem that started 30 years ago that hadn't been caught, because the property never, by covenant, should have been severed from the subdivision lot. The covenant restrictions prohibit subdividing any lot and also stipulate that no property shall be used for any other purposes other than R1 designation. So I don't know where we go from there, because it has been part of that property for 3 decades. However, it's not been completely used. If you were to, I've lived there over a dozen years now, and until this last 2 weeks, we didn't know it didn't belong to the property across the street, because it's been maintained by the owners of Lot 93. They've kept it, they've used it, they parked in front of it for at least a decade now. So we knew part of that. So from what I understand, part of the fence is on the R1, but it's not completely to the edge of the R1 designation right now. And honestly, I don't know the owners. I don't know what their plan is. From what I understand, it seems going to be a good neighbor. However, as a planning commission, we can't just look at the right now. And changing that whole thing to a C3 brings heavy commercial business to the third residential property on the other side of the street, which is fairly deep into a residential neighborhood for heavy commercial. Talking with the Planning Commission, they also said since there is an existing drive that is on the R1 property, if they did sell it in the future, there would be nothing to prohibit anyone from using that as a driveway in the C3 designation, since it's pre-existing. That's a concern on a residential street. We already struggle with commercial traffic coming down our street from Plant Outlet on the other end, 18-wheelers coming down the street, their trucks coming down almost every day, barreling down the street. Nothing we can really do to stop it. City is not going to put a police officer there and patrol it. So we get through traffic already. And that's a major concern for us as a property owner with small children who are out in the front yard at times and who are going across to a friend's house with the potential of additional commercial traffic coming down there. And that R1 designation does give a little bit of a barrier. And I know there's an issue that needs to be resolved because we do have an incongruity in the zoning of the 2 lots. However, I don't know that C3 needs to go 3 residential properties deep into a neighborhood. That's concerning, and I think long-term, while the current owner's plans, I don't have any indication that what they're going to do would harm the neighborhood. But if 6 months from now their business changes, they need more space and they sell, it could become a restaurant with a drive-through without having to do any rezoning, from my understanding, in a C3. I wish we could come to a resolution. My hope would be I think it's 03, that's across the street at the dental clinic, and there's another quiet office there across the street. That would be more conducive toward the residential neighborhood. And I think we could easily get on board to rectify the situation, to bring the properties under one zoning without coming that deep into a residential neighborhood with heavy commercial business. And that's really our concern. It's not with the current owners. Their current plan seems like it's going to be good neighbors. But down the road, it could be anything. And our request would be that you would deny the C3 to at least keep a barrier there for us as residents, or propose or consider a different zoning that would be consistent with what we're going to do, but also to protect us as residents, that limits the traffic, makes it much more conducive to a residential, abutting a residence. And because it's to the third house, completely in front of two properties, and then to the third property on the other side of the street. So we would ask that a C3 be denied. We would gladly support possibly 03 if that would be conducive to that. But looking down the road, our fear is that a C3 opens it up to a lot of things going forward because once it's there, it's done, and we'll have no recourse. If there's a C3 there, it'd be pretty much open to anything on that corner. And that goes deep into our neighborhood. So our request would be to come to some other consideration for zoning that would be consistent with what the current owner wants to do, but also not allow heavy commercial traffic to come deep into our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. South. Is there anyone else to speak in opposition? Let me grab the rest if there's any other oppositions. Any other opposing?
Good evening. My name is Mark Ledbetter. I live at 805 Teal Drive, just north of Bend, and I agree with everything he said. We've had trouble from the other end, the C3 at the other end, trucks coming through delivering stuff. People have to put children at play out signs, and that doesn't slow them down. And I did talk to Chris today, the gentleman that's putting in the office there, and he seemed receptive to trying to talk about, see what we could do to get it to an 03. And I don't know what route that would take or what it would look like, but that's certainly what we would like to see done. We don't want to hold him back or anything else, but we'd like to see that done at this time. Thank you.
Sir.
Restating your name and address, I didn't catch it.
805. We've been there since 1990. Thank you.
Any others in opposition? All right, sir, that one that wanted to speak in favor of, come on down.
I'm the contractor on the job. I just wanted to clarify a few things. We're basically talking about the last 8 feet of the backyard. You know, it's not like we're opening up for heavy commercial traffic. We're just trying to clean up a mess that was created when the subdivision was developed. You know, being able to pull our permits and get everything corrected. I don't even know that my customers have any clients in state. So it's not like you'll see any traffic at all. But just getting the mess cleaned up, we are going to be changing the roof line and make it a little more residential friendly and make it look better. So it's going to look like a nice place. But we'd like to clean up the backyard as well. And I think he's talked about doing a deck on the back of the structure, which if you was to drive in through the driveway, you'd be driving into that deck at that point. So it's not likely that there'll be anybody driving back there. And I think he talked about doing some landscaping and some other things that would make it look just nicer. So we're not looking for heavy traffic. We're just trying to clean up this lot line and move forward with the remodel and keep everything looking good. But he is trying to be friendly to the neighborhood for sure. That's all I need to say.
Thank you. Any others in favor of or opposing? Sure.
I'm Chris Hamley. I own the property, actually, so it's flattering to have a lot of people talk about me, so thank you. So we're a consulting business, first and foremost. We design distribution centers. To Josh's point, we don't have any clients here in the state even. We travel constantly. There are only about 4 or 5 of us that work here locally. We've got an office just down the street here right now, actually. And our goal is just to do that. It's to clean up the space. We are moving out to West Conway, wanting some place to be close out there. We wouldn't be having this conversation if there weren't this issue to begin with, honestly. You know, well, Mr. Ledbetter mentioned that we might be receptive to other rezoning options. I can't say that we're not or open to them at least. We don't know what those might look like, honestly. At the end of the day, I just need the permit so we can keep going. We have some timelines out there we're trying to meet. We're trying to get moved in by the end of the year. So well, that's it. Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, so I don't know if this is to staff or the applicant, but is the sole reason that C3 is being pursued just because the other lot or the other area is C3?
Yes.
For consistency?
Yeah. But with that being said, because again, Mr. Ledbetter brought that up to me this afternoon, actually, of looking at something else. There's a consideration of valuation there that we've got to think about long-term as well.
Sure, yeah.
So potentially O3 would suit your needs, but diminish value. Is that what I'm
That's true.
understanding?
That's
Okay.
true, yes.
Questions for him? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So the question, well, sorry. Got a question for staff when it's the right time.
Is anyone else?
Is anyone else to speak in favor of or opposing? All right, then we'll bring this back into commission for discussion. Go ahead, Adam.
So the projected traffic impact, there wasn't one.
We didn't provide that. The use, I would, from our, when we studied it, the way the use was going, it was going away from a retail front, which was Gerald's Pools. He had a retail component as well as a service component. The rear yard was used to store chemicals and supplies and so forth. So actually the use, while the zoning isn't changing for the front piece, the use was actually becoming less intense, as it were, going to more of an office type use. So the use wasn't changing, wouldn't create any additional traffic.
So with the no increased traffic impact, was the consideration that could be used as an avenue to access the business, that driveway?
We did not do that because we made it very clear that so this particular project is not just subject to building permits and plating requirements, it's also undergone a site development review, as it were. So that was off the table, like that there's no additional access from that Teal Drive. That Teal Drive access was not approved through a planning process when it was installed. And like Josh said, they are actually, part of the building permit is adding a deck to the back of the property, so it will actually block any access from that. And so that was not a consideration, right? Because it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's tied to the second piece that's coming, right? That you mentioned earlier.
That. The deck? What do you mean?
Well, never mind. Let me think about it for a second.
Okay. Yeah. It's kind of this one building permit process, kind of when staff goes to look at, as planning staff does zoning and subdivision checks on every building permit that comes through. So when we did that for this particular building permit, we discovered this process, which triggered this process, which triggered this process, and it kind of sent us down this rabbit hole of discovering 30 years of nonconformity on this particular process. So that's kind of how we ended up here. So, yeah. Okay. Any others?
I think my question is, I can really see both sides of this and also understand the future fear of if this business moves on and someone else moves in that wants to put in a restaurant or something like that, that could heavily impact this neighborhood. So is there a feasible way to fix this tonight where he can get the permits he needs to do his thing, but also help with the fears of future businesses coming in there?
What permits are currently tabled or held?
Are you able to work right now, or you want to stop?
They were able to pull a permit just not
Right.
approved.
There's that concession. They are working, they're able to move forward and work with the understanding that should this not be approved, that's going to impact. They do have a replat in progress. Again, we're just waiting to finish that. It'll impact that. If there's some sort of split zoning or something like that, that'll just be an additional process at a future meeting. They'll have to come back with a new application. there are ways around it, concessions they might be willing to make, but I don't know that any of that can be approved right this moment.
So go ahead,
No,
Letitia.
you're okay. So would the O3 not get them the permits that they needed, or was that what you were saying? You have to start the
Well,
application process?
So an applicant can verbally amend a rezoning request at the meeting, but they can only, I believe they can only verbally amend within the same zoning family, as it were. So they could request a lesser zone in commercial, but to come back for an office zoning, either way, they're going to have to come back to a future meeting. So to give proper time for public notification and legal notices and so forth. So
They have to go back to the whole legal notice.
Right.
But correct me if I'm wrong. Say they go out of business, somebody else wants to come in. It's already C3. Building gets bulldozed. It would have to go through a review by the city, which likely would not accept residential street as an access.
Right. And there are quite a few, not provisions, but quite a few protections in place anytime you have a very intense zoning district butting up right against a residential one, as far as additional buffering and landscaping to mitigate any impacts against those. So in the event that the structure is removed and the site's redeveloped, it will go through site development review, and it will be subject to all of those additional considerations.
So, go ahead.
I was just going to say, but if the building is not bulldozed and a new business comes in and they want to retrofit it inside however they want to, it doesn't stop. Right? Then there's no repercussions to stop it,
The
right?
only thing that it's not going to stop is the small piece that's outlined in is that 0.1 acre. They could come in and build a McDonald's on the existing C3 portion right now. I mean, it is what it is. If you look back through the records of how the property came to be in its current state, all of that from the corner where the fueling station is all the way down to Teal Drive was in 1988 was zoned for intense commercial when it was annexed. So it's not a recent change. I'm not sure at what point Mallard Crossing went in, but they just meet right there without any additional buffering or transition. So
And I would add it more than likely if this were to come in today, that we probably wouldn't recommend it to go C3,
I would agree
but
with
it is an existing condition. Are there potential uses that could go on in C3 that might have an adverse impact on the adjacent property? Potentially. If staff were to review a request for something that's less intense, would we support that? I would say, absolutely, most likely. But again, this is the application that's been provided at this point.
Adam, did you have a question?
Well, I mean, given that C3 is already present there, I was wondering if there is an avenue to approve this small piece as C3, but limit the driveway access. That seems to be what the major concern is the increased traffic and more activity through there. And if that was limited, I don't see how that could happen.
Condition the rezoning, but if you've verbally heard the applicant offer that up, it could be, we could work towards that, but we can't apply I can't make the rezoning contingent upon it, so there is that. I don't think it serves the current use the way it did the previous use. I'll say that.
So there's no conditions to have any type of barriers or anything like that? Is that
Only
what you're saying?
because the property's not being redeveloped. It's an interior remodel project, as well as they're doing a little to the front facing Prince Street, doing a deck. So it didn't allow us the opportunity, we didn't have the authority to require additional buffering in this particular instance. Complete redevelopment, yes, we would be able to do that.
And with any time that there's a rezoning, C3 at 4106 Prince has to be the same C3 that is at 2106 Oak Street. So that the regulations that apply to those properties that are zoned that way have to apply uniformly across the city.
I do have one question. Mr. South brought up the subdivision covenants. I know we don't take jurisdiction over those covenants, but this could come up future. Like, how does that work?
It's unfortunately, restrictive covenants, those are agreements between property owners. So it's it would be essentially like us, dictating what someone else has agreed upon. We're really not, we're not a party to it. We can recognize that they exist, but in terms of enforcement, the city has no role in enforcing an agreement between property owners.
Does anybody have any other questions? Discussion at all? Hard one.
They said that if he brought it back with the 03, that he would have to do the application process again. I guess I wanted clarity on, does that stop their work?
No, but it doesn't stop the current work, but as they approach the end of that project, they will not be able to get a certificate of completion until all of these processes are cleaned up and finalized, the platting and all of that.
They'll resend out, have to do the notice and all that again.
If the application is amended outside of the commercial zoning, it will represent like a whole new application. It will come back to you. If they were to drop to like a C2, if they verbally amended, we would just table this to the next meeting and continue the public hearing, but just depends on what other zoning they proposed.
So, staff, what are the options for fixing the problem long-term? So we're cleaning up something from the late 80s now. What do you see as the different avenues here?
The most straightforward is just the straight rezoning. You could do an amended zoning staff would have to look at specifically what the use is. C3 obviously captured it, but we would have to look at specifically what the different uses are that they're proposing there to make sure that a different zoning district they would be permitted to do all of those. So they could either amend their request down to a C2, a neighborhood commercial district. A neighborhood commercial district does not allow drive-throughs for restaurants by right. That's a conditional use permit. So if that would alleviate a fear, or a concern. It also doesn't allow any automotive uses, no car washes or car dealerships or mechanics or anything like that. So C2 is an option. If they want to look at maybe modifying the whole site, we could maybe have them propose to go to an office zoning. But again, that represents an entirely new application process. Either way, we're going to another meeting if they amend it or they do propose that. I will say if you take action tonight, if you take final action denying this, they cannot come back with a brand new application next month because they have to wait a year. So if that's something you're considering, you might want to table it and discuss with staff and the applicant about a new application, or if they feel they want to amend it and you are comfortable with a neighborhood commercial, that's something that we could then also table the request for next month.
So if we went to C2, which is neighborhood commercial,
Correct.
That would allow them to do everything they want to and prevent the future issue that the residents of the neighborhood are concerned with.
Right.
I think.
I can't speak.
Yeah, obviously there's a whole component of the applicant's needs. I think.
Sure.
From the perspective of what the planning commission can do tonight, it's really essentially deny, which would then kick them out. They couldn't come back for a year. Table, where they allow the applicant to have some sort of discussion or look at a different application, or approve, which would move it forward.
That's a much more succinct way to say what I was going to say.
And clarify the conditional use again versus what Drew was just talking about.
So in the
C2.
future, if this portion or the entire site was ultimately rezoned to commercial, and at some point the site was redeveloped and they proposed some sort of project or some sort of development that wanted to drive through, say like a coffee shop or something, that's not allowed by right. They would have to come back through the planning commission to get a conditional use permit approved, at which point the planning commission could put additional buffering and landscaping conditions and location of the drive-through and so forth. But ultimately, it would be up to you whether that use was allowed or not. They could come in with a restaurant, but not a drive-through component.
Okay, so clarifying, if C3 passes, they would still have to come back for the commission for a drive-through or anything like that, is what you're saying? Okay,
C3.
you're saying C2.
C2, correct.
C2 would add that.
C2 takes out the drive-through component and most automotive, if not all automotive uses. So
And-
that's the big difference. in
If
the
they
two.
went with C2 today, if they were agreeable, then they wouldn't have to redo the application process because you're still in the same.
If they amend the application at the meeting, the bylaws state that it automatically has to be pushed, the public hearing has to be continued one more month to the next meeting to allow anyone who might want to speak to the amended application. So either way, like James said, approve, deny, or they're out another month regardless, yeah.
But it wouldn't stop the work. They just wouldn't be able to get their completion.
It won't stop the work, but what the client is saying is their timeline, I guess, is within the timeline of the next planning commission meeting, I guess, when they're trying to get in to the building. I don't know their timeline. I can't speak to that.
He come back up.
Yeah, that's.
Could you tell us again the timeline that you guys are trying to get that building open for business?
I need him moved in by December 20th. And what I was proposing was removing the driveway. And if we remove the driveway and it's a C3, as you all said, they would have to get permission to put one back there. So there would be no other way, right, for them to come in and put a driveway or whatever your concerns are. And we're only talking about 8 feet. So you can't really fit a driveway on 8 feet, so that's not really a problem there. And we were kind of forced by the city to have to do this so we could get this complete. And I don't foresee a problem, especially with the amount of landscaping and deck and everything that'll be back there. I think they're going to be really happy with the building, and y'all will too when we're finished with it.
I think the concern was just the future use. I don't think it was.
But if we were to remove the driveway, would that alleviate, they wouldn't be able to put another one back without your permission, would they?
Is that accurate, James?
So-
Beth?
It would go through site review before they would be able to build.
They removed the driveway.
Yeah, to add it back, they'd have to go through site
And that's what he
development
was
review.
proposing to make it more comfortable to move forward with the C3, I guess.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, but again, no conditions can be applied
Right,
to it.
it's,
So-
it's a trust.
Yeah, it's a matter of trust.
So, question. I'm certainly willing to put this to a vote. It's supported by staff. We've heard your intention to not use the driveway. But I would ask, I guess you, and the owner, if you would, given there's been some discussion here tonight, would you prefer to see this be tabled at the risk that the vote is denied and it is out for a year?
No.
Or do you want to see it go to a vote?
I'd like to see it go to a vote.
Okay. There's no other discussion. I'm willing to put it to a vote, see where we're at.
I'm ready to vote.
Okay. So I will move to approve staff's recommendation to approve the request on the basis it will allow for appropriate use of the property.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Let's go person by person and vote. We'll start with Adam.
Aye. Or yes, in favor.
Greg? Drew?
No.
Yes.
Tisha?
Yes.
Ethan?
Yes.
Becca?
Yes.
What was that?
Chair has to vote. The chair has to vote.
Have to vote, Laura. Wait.
How did you vote?
No.
Two noes.
There's 5
1, 2,
yeas thus
3, 4.
far.
It was 5 yeses and 2
1, 2,
noes.
3. Oh, I apologize. Okay, math's not much wrong too. Sorry. Oh, no.
Does she need to vote?
So do I have
Are
to
we good?
vote?
Yes.
If you choose to
Or you can
vote,
abstain.
or you can abstain. Yeah.
This isn't too.
This is a struggle. I would have rather have tabled so that they would have had time to amend this appropriately. And still, I think we could have voted with the amendments next month and still got them in on their December the 25th table.
If you do vote to not deny, you can expunge the vote after it's occurred.
Say that one more time.
I said if you vote to deny, then you could have take action, a motion to expunge the vote, and then just have a substitution motion of tabling the item.
We can do that?
Yeah.
If I vote to deny.
Correct.
And that's what I want to do. I'll vote to deny so that we can table it and have them come back. I don't want them to wait a whole year.
So that would be, so in that situation, if you vote to deny, motion fails, then there would need to be a motion to expunge the previous vote.
Vote.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstaining? So we can make a motion to table it.
I move to table item 2A, the request to rezone R1 to C3 at 4106 Prince Street, and to come back at the next planning commission meeting, to be taken up at the next commission meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And this means that staff will be working with the applicant to try to,
Correct.
okay. That was a difficult one. All right, let me make sure. All right, so next up is the request for conditional use permit up to 12 dwelling units per acre, single lot in R2A zoning.
Okay, you'll probably recognize this property. Last month, you considered the rezoning. It was A1. You recommended approval to rezone it to R2A. It's a 1.2 acre property located at Lower Ridge Road and Matthews Meadows Lane. The applicant desires to develop at least duplexes, so 4 dwelling units on the site, but they want to develop it on a singular lot. So this is not permitted by right in the R2A zoning district, but it is as a conditional use. At staff's recommendation, following the rezoning last month, we recommended that they come back for a conditional use permit to allow increased density, and the least dense option in the zoning district, or in the zoning code, excuse me, is for density up to 12 units per acre on a single lot. Again, the applicant is just intending to build 2 duplexes or 4 units, but that's the least dense conditional use that we can present. The Lower Ridge Road corridor study is also in play here, and its findings indicate that a slightly more dense traditional neighborhood development is appropriate at this location, so duplexes are a good fit. In October 2019, the Matthews Meadows PUD was amended to allow a similar development on property immediately to the east across Matthews Meadows Lane. Prior to development, platting of this property will be required, and if the conditional use is used and more than 2 dwelling units are developed on a singular lot, site development review will also be required. Access will be limited to Matthews Meadows Lane, and staff has applied the same design standards from the 2019 approval as conditions of approval to this request. And as conditioned, the conditional use will allow for appropriate development of the property by creating a cohesive gateway or entry to Matthews Meadows PUD, and it will not likely negatively impact adjacent property. Staff does recommend 14 conditions as conditions of approval. Again, they all align with the previous 2019 conditions, and they are in your report. If you have any questions about those, please let me know. Staff recommends approval.
Have any questions for her? All right, thank you.
Welcome.
All right, is there anyone here to speak in favor of?
Megan Workworth, again, 240 Skyline Drive with the Tyler Group. I'm speaking on behalf of the client. He's just proposing two duplexes fronting Lower Ridge Road, and needs the conditional use permit for that. And we've read all the conditions, and we agree with them.
Thank you. Is there anyone else to speak in favor of? Any opposition? All right, let's bring it back in for discussion. Anybody have any questions at all about this?
I'll make a motion to approve staff recommendations.
Second.
Rebecca can have it.
Thanks, Drew. Appreciate that.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Abstention? All right, motion carries. All right, third item is the request to rezone from A1 to R2A at the southwest corner of Lower Ridge and Matthew Meadows.
Yes, this is at 3455 Dave Ward Drive, which is just north of Campbell Cove, Phase 2. It's currently 0.86 acres. The current zoning is A1 agricultural. They're requesting the rezoning to C2 neighborhood commercial. The adjacent zoning across Dave Ward is O1 office. South is R1, which is the Phase 2 of Campbell Cove. And then west and east are both A1 zones. The projected traffic impact with the rezoning to C2, the traffic impact could be significant. The highest generating use that could be in a C2 zoning would be a restaurant without a drive-through, which could yield more than 1,000 vehicle trips per typical weekday. The applicant is proposing an automobile accessory tire or battery shop in concurrent with this application. Given this, it's anticipated that the proposed development will generate roughly 108 vehicle trips per typical weekday. We've reviewed this. Property surrounded by residential districts with a large single-family subdivision to the south. There's a similar business to the north that was mentioned that previously existed through a non-conforming status. They're in the process of relocating, and that property will go back to the A1 zoning and have to meet those regulations. The land use plan designates this area as a transitional zone. That zone does allow for more intense land uses when deemed appropriate, but this is only when sensitivity to adjoining residential areas is taken into account. And we believe the zoning change could negatively impact the adjacent properties, given the nature of the business and the surrounding residential properties in the area. So for all of this, staff would recommend denial of this application.
Anybody have any questions? Thank you. Is there anyone here to speak in favor?
Hey, Thomas Vinson, 904 Front Street for the applicant. As is set forth in the staff report, 8-Day Tire is seeking to purchase this property and move its operations about a mile west of its current location down here to 3455 Dave Ward Drive. So, you know, the elephant in the room here is the way 8 Days operations look currently. That facility is not owned by 8 Day. They rent it, and they've outgrown it. It's been outgrown for a long time. There's not any room behind it. And the owner is not willing to invest in the facilities to make it more aesthetically pleasing. They just want to hold on to it until they die and then let their kids sell it. So 8 Days' idea is to move its operations west. And I think they're in your packet. They've had some renderings done for the by an architect for what they propose. It's a architectural rendering and a site plan for what they would intend to do. And if approved, they would perform all of their work inside. The repair bays would be around back. Parking would be around the sides and the back. And it would otherwise maintain an appearance that's consistent with other businesses in the area. They're willing to put up fences, landscaping, any other sort of buffers that may be necessary to protect other neighboring homeowners' interests. This property is located on the Transitional Commercial Corridor and fronts Dave Ward Drive. So we respectfully state that there can't be any real impact on traffic on Dave Ward Drive when you're a quarter mile from Walmart. It's the one of the busiest streets in town, and it's going to be that way whether there's a tire shop at this address or not. Dave Ward facilitates all the traffic between East and West Conway. So for that reason, and because it fronts Dave Ward, it's attractive for commercial uses, but not for new residential uses. Since the time Dave Ward was expanded to include medians 15 or 20 years ago, all the development fronting Dave Ward has been commercial. There's not been people building single-family residential houses on Dave Ward Drive for a long time. So this property is directly across the street from Triple C Automotive, which is a very similar business. Other businesses within half a mile of this location are the Walmart Supercenter, which has a full-service tire and auto, Triple C Sales and Service, Trailers Plus. They both have sales in the front, and then they actually manufacture trailers in the back. There's 2 auto parts stores, and then also the new location for Total Tire and Auto is essentially catty corner right across the street. That hasn't been built yet, obviously, but it's Zone C3, and I think they're on the final stages with you all. So we would just submit that this proposed land use is consistent with the nearby uses. It's consistent with the logical pattern of land uses in the area. Again, ultimately, the highest and best use of this property is commercial. That's clearly the direction that this area is moving. The property has been actively listed for sale for over a year. Owner's not been able to sell it because of the way it's zoned and the fact that it's not suitable for residential development or building. So the only way they're able to get an offer on the property is by marketing it with commercial opportunities, and the sale is contingent on this rezoning with the conditional use permit. There's just not a market for residential buyers here. We understand that the neighbors have concerns. We want to be good neighbors, and that's why we have requested the C2 zoning with conditional use permit rather than the C3. By doing that, the idea is that the city, in conjunction with the neighbors, can impose conditions on the development and use of this property that everyone can live with. The planning staff put together a list of conditions and their recommendations, and those are all acceptable to 8-day. And we're open to discussing other requests that the neighbors or the commission may have. The bottom line is we want to get this done. We want to work with the neighbors to have something there that's, while consistent with the commercial transition zone, but also we want to be good neighbors. I've noticed in the packet there are some environmental concerns raised by the neighbors. We would just like to note that we're not recapping tires. We don't have chemicals. We don't do batteries. We don't do oil changes. We don't dispose of anything there. It's just a tire business. We would operate during normal business hours, and I'm happy to address any concerns or answer any questions that I can.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Vincent?
I've got a question for staff, just based off some of the comments he made. I know it's currently A1, and part of the reasoning that it wasn't consistent with the comprehensive plan, but if not C2, what's envisioned there?
Well, I mean, the zoning across the street is O1. So the way that the comprehensive plan was laid out, there's a series of nodes. So those nodes are either commercial services nodes, neighborhood shopping nodes, or regional commercial nodes. And the original intent behind the plan was to have that commercial concentrate around those nodes. This is, and you can see a pretty stark line where the I-1 and the C3 ends to the west of here. When you look at the zoning map, you'll see that at major intersections. The idea was that as those areas filled up, that you would have then a transition where more of the corridor would go commercial. Across the street, you've got a lot of land that's currently O1 that's not occupied. The business that was there at the northwest corner of Diane Lane is moving to another location. So it's ostensibly the type of use that you might otherwise see in that transition would be some type of office use.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Do we have anyone else to speak in favor of this? You want to speak in opposition? And first person will have up to 10 minutes, and then it's 3 minutes thereafter.
Did the council get a chance to look at the open
Sir,
letter?
can you state your name and your address,
Oh,
please?
Winton
Sorry.
Madison. I own the acre next to the proposed project. I also live in the residence on the hill next to the proposed project.
All right, thank you, sir. Go ahead.
Okay. My first question is, did the council look at or get a chance to review in detail the open letter put in the newsletter, in your staff newsletter?
Yes, sir, we've read that.
Okay. So we agree with the council denying this request. It is not in harmony with all of the residents surrounding the proposed business due to the nature of the business. As you will see in the open letter, there are traffic and safety problems right off the bat. Coming across the crest of that hill with several cars stopping to go in driveways would be a definite hazard. It could cause very many accidents in the future. We also look at the pollutants that can come from used tires, from the residue from used tires sipping into the groundwater. We presently have 2 wells that are still operating in the area. And, you know, that seeping into the groundwater would be detrimental to the residents that are there now, including myself. If the council has read this in detail, I may not have to go over the whole thing because the council is in denial of this. But we do not, in all circumstances, would feel that a tire company would be harmonious to that acre and to being a neighbor. Any questions?
Sir, thank you so much for coming.
Okay.
Is there anyone else to speak in opposition? Yes, sir. If you'll give us your name and your address, please.
I would like to say that my name is Larry Ackland, and my address is 3489 Dave Ward Drive. And I'm just going to say this is my first time ever being before the commission, and just like to say good afternoon. But I have lived in that area, that I live on top of the hill. You know, my driveway runs from Dave Ward Drive for a distance, and then up, kind of takes a little curve and go up a hill. Down the hill, there's a lot of rocks up on that hill too. But I would much rather be here today speaking for something than against something. But that area is just not, in my estimation, a place for a business, a tire shop. Now, there's a business across the street from us, but it's different. You know, it's not a barrier at all. when I look at that tire place down the street from me, it scares me to death to think about something like that being in our area, which is an area of, it's a neighborhood. You know, it's not an area for, you know, if somebody was going to build a home in there or something like that, that just is not the area for a tire shop. Now, my experience with businesses like that, my wife told me, said, they're going to put a tire shop down here in front of the house. I said, what? I said, come on now. So I got to thinking about, you know, tires, they draw mosquitoes. They draw bugs and snakes and everything else. And I can't imagine my kids and my grandkids, my great-grandkids, they ride their bicycles all the way, you know, down up and down our driveway. It's just been a great community for the last 44 years. That's how long I've lived there. And I, you know, in all due respect to the gentleman here, it's not that I have a business here in town. I've been in town here. My business is Larry G. Ackland Funeral Home. But it's not located. I wanted to make sure that it's in a business area. It's not located in it, because some folks are scared of dead people. My wife's one of them. But, you know, I didn't want to, I just didn't, it's on Walnut Street, because I didn't want to cause the residents in the city any concern. You know what I'm saying? In other words, to me, I've been doing it for 44 years, but they haven't been doing it for 44 years. And that's kind of the same situation here, in that I can't imagine looking at the building down the street from us, that's the business that we're talking about moving down this way. I can't imagine tires and things like that all outside the building, and mosquitoes flying everywhere, because I know tires and stuff like that, they do draw insects, mosquitoes, and that hurts when a mosquito bites you.
Thank you, Mr. Ackland. You have exacerbated your 3 minutes.
Okay, well, I think, thank you all so much.
Is there anybody else to speak in opposition of? Yes, ma'am.
I live at 3489 Daywood Drive. I live with that young man who just spoke. And I just have a couple of things that concerns me. And like Larry said, we have lived there for 44 years. Grandchildren, and now great-grandchildren. So when I leave my home, I will be passing this tire shop right there. It's a private driveway. I will be passing this tire shop. When I come in, I'll be passing this tire shop. So there's nothing, all our privacy, safety will be gone. So I would hate to think that, and I know the building looks nice on paper, but just the idea of something like that right beside my driveway, and I see it as I go in and out every day. And that is all. I hope that you all will consider to, staff recommends the denial of this request. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else? All right. One more. Okay. Yes, ma'am. Your name and your address, please.
Ann Madison, 3411 Daywood Drive. I don't know how they named these addresses, because I'm 3111 and then that's 3455 and they're 3489. I don't know how that, and on Dorothy it's 3491. But anyway, my house is right there to the east of this business. And to the right next to me, there's a vacant lot which belongs to Ray. And he intended to build a home there. We've been there on this location for 40-something years. And then all of a sudden, you're just going to plop a commercial business in the middle of a residential area. That's not right. That is not right. And we're in opposition to it. We've been having to fight for these businesses that are coming on Dave Ward. We've lost some and we've won some. But this is getting into our residential area. Now, Triple C across the street was built before we were annexed into the city of Conway. So nothing was objected then. You know, we were in the country. Cows would be there. I guess that's why it's zoned A1. I would come home and cows would be in the yard. But since Dave Ward, it's changed. But we really object to that business being right there in the middle of our residential area. Thank you for listening.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Anyone else? All right, let's bring this back into commission. Is there any discussion? No, sir, we've already brought it back into commission. Thank you.
We have the ability to add conditions of like buffer area. Like they could have like a buffer fence or landscaping along the sides that abut residential properties. to this.
That would be a point of discussion on the next item that's contingent on the rezone.
I have a question for you. So this right here is proposed subdivision coming in, right?
No, it is existing.
It is existing. Okay, I just can't see. So it would be butting, like, if they're driving vehicles in the backside and they're taking off tires with impact wrenches, it would be directly behind these houses.
You can, the conditional use shows, if you look on the, not that we're not considering
Right.
the conditional use at this time, but that shows a conceptual site plan. So there is a small buffer that exists between that parcel that Mr. Crafton owns, but yes.
James, question, just for, I don't know that it's material to the vote in front of us, but I asked the question about what would staff support. They don't support C2 here. Does the denial of this lock this up for a year for someone to come back? And if they're marketing the property, 01 or whatever, how does that?
It would lock it up for this particular application. So, if they brought back
Okay.
C2, council could vote to allow reconsideration of a different application.
Okay.
Any other discussion, questions? Nobody's in a hurry to. You guys thinking?
About that driveway. Is it on either property? Is it on
The
Which question,
driveway?
Rebecca?
driveway?
What about?
I can't. I've got my glasses. I don't know that they'll help. Is it on one of the? Is it on the property in question?
Conway is actually owned by the applicant. Have an easement property. Conway is owned by the current.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I could see before I had kids, and now I can't see anything.
So
So
that driveway doesn't go back to that neighborhood, like people can't cut through there to go through the neighborhood.
It goes to that single house back there. So the neighborhood access is next to Central Baptist, the big drive you see in there.
is that correct, or do you know?
That appears consistent.
Okay.
No more comments, please. We have this back in commission.
I'm ready to make a motion, if that's okay with you. Yeah. I move to accept the staff recommendation to deny the request.
Second.
So the motion has been made and seconded to go with staff recommendation to deny the rezoning. Let's do a roll call.
Make sure that it's clear what
Right.
a yes means no. on the
No
application.
means yes.
Well, let's just say it this way. A yes means that you're voting to deny the request.
Yes
Correct.
means you're voting to deny. Yes.
Right. Adam? Greg?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
Alexander?
No.
Letitia?
Yes.
Yes.
Becca? Yes. So that means their request is denied.
Correct.
Correct.
But they can't, if they want to, they can appeal to the city council, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So the rezoning request has been denied at this time.
Which the next follows it, right?
Yes, so does this conditional use permit,
Yeah,
it
can't
gets
be
canceled
heard.
out? Right, okay. All right, the next item is the request for major PUD modification, the central landing PUD at Bruce and 6th Streets.
So now that y'all are good and softened up, let's have an exceedingly complicated and confusing application to consider. Just a little levity in this. So this is a request for a major modification on a PUD. To be clear, on these types of applications, they're considered for public hearing. With a major PUD modification, action by the commission is final unless it's appealed in that situation. So if you approve it, that's final approval. If you deny it, that's final action. If you deny it and they appeal, then it goes to city council. So that's, I just want to preface that in terms of looking at this. This particular application is for the central landing PUD. It's approximately 158 acres. This portion of the application only does not deal with the Fontaine Blue apartments. That is owned by a separate property owner. The remainder of this is owned by the Conway Development Corporation. And so since that property owner was not sort of a part of the application, then this is not going to amend their property in that situation. There's a sort of a mix of different types of zoning that are adjacent to this property. It in many ways is a transition between several different types of uses. You've got commercial and multifamily uses to the west. You've got a variety of different lower density residential uses to the north, and you've got a variety of sort of higher intensity industrial uses to the south and the east. On the comprehensive plan, this area is indicated as a special study area, which unfortunately I don't think that special study was ever completed, so we don't have good guidance from the comprehensive plan in terms of guiding how uses should be reviewed in this area. In terms of the traffic impact of this, I think the best way to term it, and there's so many different possibilities of development and uses that whatever occurs on the site is going to have a very large traffic impact, regardless, just by the sheer size of it, the sheer intensity of it, the sheer intensity of what's currently allowed. It's going to have a pretty intense use. Currently, the traffic counts on 6th Street are at about 11,000 cars per day. So that's 11,000 people that are trying to get off of Oak Street, thankfully, and using that. So it's gotten quite a bit of use. And there's about 4,700 cars per day on Bruce Street as well. In terms of this was originally planned to serve as a major retail center featuring a lifestyle center, hotels, apartments, general commercial uses, and office. These amendments that the applicant is requesting do sort of represent a major rethinking of the development and a sort of a major redirection in terms of where it's going. What they've requested, as stated by the applicant, is to allow light industrial use, institutional use, hotel uses where commercial is permitted, commercial amusement and outdoor entertainment venues, and allow accessory structures exclusive of an accessory building up to 125 feet in height. And then remove the provision that prohibits any warehouse operation except as might be incidental to the sale of goods or in a retail facility. In looking at this, staff noticed that there were no restrictions on setbacks, height, lot coverage, lot size, building placement, building design standards, landscaping, or parking as part of the original PUD. So that makes practical application of when, let's say, a building comes in, how the sort of the provisions of the PUD, how they apply, it's very difficult. So that's part of what, when staff reviewed this, was how do we make sense of how we apply this in terms of when real development occurs. It does appear that modification of the PUD is necessary. Market conditions and use demand under which the original PUD was approved no longer exist. The amendment would add some uses that would have greater external impacts on adjacent property, but the development of the PUD would constitute a significant addition to the city and bring uses that are not currently present in the community. Additionally, it would have multiple points of access, so it would generate a ton of traffic, but having multiple points of access also means that traffic could be dispersed in multiple ways off of the site as well. I figure it would, since there's 20 recommended conditions, I'll probably walk through each one of those for y'all just to explain what they mean, because again, this is really super complicated.
As long as you don't read them to us.
Yeah. The first condition deals with that this wouldn't be applying to King Air FB LLC, which is Fontainebleau Apartments. So that's what that condition means. That basically it's everything excluding that. The second condition essentially is removing all of the original exhibits to the final development plan, which you see in there. So Exhibit B, C, D, E, F, G, and H. All of those exhibits would be removed from the original development plan. Again, those are largely based on the concept that is no longer going to happen. Condition number 3 indicated the requested amendments. So if you look on page 33 of the requested amendments, that's what the land use plan would be changed to. So you've got the legend there for it would consist of single family, multifamily, commercial, retail, office, institutional, and light industrial. And sort of in that particular configuration. For the use of commercial and retail, this is meant that it be inclusive of hotels, outdoor entertainment venues, commercial amusement, except for those which are listed in Exhibit J. So Exhibit J, part of this is being retained, but it's being modified. With that, it just describes which uses in the development are prohibited. Item 12, Exhibit J, essentially what this does is allows warehouse operations within light industrial, and then it additionally would allow self-storage to be considered a commercial use as well. So where commercial uses are allowed. Removal, number 6 is removal of item 11, which pertains to carnivals, amusement parks, and circuses. That's because it would be covered otherwise under outdoor entertainment venues. Number 7, so anywhere that R is indicated as single-family residential on the overall land use plan map, those areas, if those uses would be generally governed by the provisions of R2. So effectively, if it comes in as a single-family use, it would be treated as R2. In the areas that are indicated for multifamily, if it comes in as a multifamily use, it would be effectively treated as an MF3 zone, so the high-density multifamily. If it comes in as commercial, office, or institutional, then those areas would be treated effectively as C3 zones. So all the provisions of C3 would apply in those areas. And then the areas that are indicated for light industrial, the least intensive industrial would be allowed in those areas, which is I-1. This site is adjacent to I-3 zones on the south and west. So that industrial would serve as a transition use. Condition 11 is that the landscaping, signage, and building design standards would apply in the appropriate zone in which it's located. So as applicable by the use type. So this, again, reiterating that they will apply to those certain uses. Item 12 provides them, since this is well in excess of the regional scale development size of 25 acres, they would get special signage provisions that are meant to accommodate for those types of developments. So they'd have in the form of 2 very large signs, similar to what you see out at Lewis Ranch. They'd be allowed to have something similar to that. Number 13 essentially means that they would have to, all the building design standards would apply, all the landscaping standards would apply that are in Article 1101. Number 14 is kind of reiterates that as well. 15 basically says that they would have to meet all of the subdivision requirements. So when a site develops, they would have to subdivide the property, which is normal to any site. 16, the existing provisions of the improvement district would become part of this. So the improvement district exists to maintain some of the street landscaping that's out there. This essentially would make that part of the PUD regulations in and of itself. 17 would pertain to the development of streets, just making sure that development of streets would be consistent with the master plan. And then 18 and 19, those are 2 existing provisions that deal with traffic flow and future connections. And then number 20 basically stipulates that any additional modifications to the development would come back to the Planning Commission. So now that I've put y'all to sleep, you have any questions? All righty.
Is there anyone here to speak in favor?
Corey Parks, Conway Development Corporation, 900 Oak Street. Based on James' comments, I feel like I should almost just say ditto with the exception of this being complicated. I feel like it's fairly straightforward. With the shift in the market, from where we were when this was originally approved, the intention with this was, as a staff, we looked at this property holistically to understand what were any possible uses we would want to see as we reimagine what this development looks like long term for it to be more sustainable. And so that's why there's all of those changes, because we wanted to come through one time thinking through all of the potential changes we might have. There's not a current or a new site plan necessarily for the entire development, because that was going to be contingent upon this approval or not. And so I would say, separate of what James commented on, I wanted to mention a few things that have been mentioned either to me personally throughout this public hearing process or in the previous hearing. So as far as a major modification, from the way that I understand it, that was necessary because of the acres, because for the most part, with the exception of allowing a hotel where commercial is permitted and shifting things on the map a little bit, and because I don't think there's any truly new circles on the map, it's more so shifting what they look like compared to what we were originally expecting. Detention and retention and roads, that was something that was commented on. So we're actively working with the appropriate city employees to address both drainage and the master street plan. So this development will be in line with that. From an industrial standpoint, it is light industrial. What does that mean? We're still figuring that out, but I would say that anything that would be in this space is going to be contained, and it's going to be something that would be not less of a nuisance to a residential area, because again, we're thinking about this development in its totality, not just one-off projects. In regards to institutional use, because that was a question that we were asked, that's added with the intent to have a potential development for an educational training facility. Residential, we want to increase the diversity of housing availability with projects similar to the Fountain Blue Apartments. And then as far as active projects, my entire day basically is around non-disclosure agreements. So I want to be as transparent as I can, but it's not good business to get out in front of a deal that's non-existent. And so I'll give as much information as I can, but it's not because I don't want to be as transparent. It's because that's not appropriate as we're trying to think through potential uses for this. And with that, I'll open it up, I guess, to any questions.
Is the Conway Development Corporation good with all the staff recommendations listed?
Yes, we had one issue, but that's been addressed.
Will any of this have any bearing on the, this is probably the right name, but like the aquatic center that we?
So we're working closely, when I was referencing the drainage, we're working closely with the city to ensure that this is like as congruent as possible. So anything that's done out there is going to be done in partnership. It's not going to be project by project. It's looking at the total development and how it will be a beneficial or benefit to the community, because that's 158 some odd acres. And so if this is done incorrectly, that will have a lasting impact for the foreseeable future.
I just have one question. Basically, across the street is a very old neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
Have you guys addressed and looked at any possible negative impacts that this could have on that neighborhood?
I would defer to them, but I would say that as long as I've been involved, we've been good partners, I think, and good neighbors as far as trying to the best we can maintain the development as we try to show it. And I would not expect it to change moving forward.
Do you have any other questions for Corey?
So nothing on this has any bearing on the Fountain Blue?
No.
That's there. So like the industrial stuff that's still going on there,
Mm-hmm.
and like the trees and stuff that have been planted, but
Mm-hmm.
tended to not, but
Yeah.
sort of, is there any, I mean, I know that's not what
Yeah,
we're-
I can't comment on that development specifically. I would just say, as it relates to industrial, the goal with really all of this is to make it as smooth of a transition as we can. And so that's why it was referenced light industrial instead of industrial, even though I-3 surrounds that, which I would argue we probably don't have a lot of heavy industrial here. I think that was just to allow for, as that business park was developed to allow for, industrial park, I should say, to allow for whatever use could come. And so without answering your question, I would say we're going to try to transition as much as we can and be good neighbors to the existing property owners.
I can't say Fountain Blue. They are in at the end of the road in terms of trying to obtain certificate of occupancy. So there's still some issues to be addressed on site that will change the way that some of that looks.
Hey, Corey, I have just one question for you, and I don't know if you can answer it or not. Is this
I'll try.
something, will you guys be probably working with multiple developers for this site, or are you trying to work with just one developer?
I would argue that it could be either or, but we tried one developer. Not saying that that's not a path that we wouldn't go down again. But currently, there's a number of potential buyers that we're working with, and so there could be a scenario where there's a developer that we work with for a larger portion. But as far as the overall development, I would be surprised if that happens, but you can never say never, because that was the case at one time.
Any other questions for Corey?
I have one more, just on number 4. So as far as the neighbors across the street, I guess they're aware that they possibly could have maybe a hotel be right across the street from their residence. I mean,
there were signs that I personally put out twice. There were
surprised
notices
they're
that were
not
sent.
here.
I'm sorry.
I'm just surprised they're not here. Like, because there's a new hotel going
Yeah.
out there, but that's kind of high. So I just would be kind of surprised that they're not.
Yeah, I
saying
can't.
anything about a hotel going in across the street.
Probably not much different from those apartments.
Yeah, I can't. Let's see. So on bullet
Hotel's a
3
little
on the
different.
letter that we sent, it was included. But again, this is the things that we're talking about are conceptual. It'd be great if that happens, but until there's dirt moving and there's a building going up, there's not a hotel.
But no one has to come back before us, or there's.
Oh, I mean,
What-
there's a process for them to be, because it's the same with Fountain Blue. Like they have to go through and to get their building
Oh, they would-
occupancy.
Somebody
Yeah,
would come.
yeah. There's site review. There's all.
Yeah, they would have to plat and go through development review, site development.
So at that
review.
point, the neighbors may be more involved than what we're talking about right now.
No, but it would meet the requirements of zoning at that point. So it would be, I mean, essentially equivalent to it being a C3 zoning or similar zoning. The buffering requirements are, various things.
The biggest concern that I had was, or that I received, people asking questions about was the industrial use. They were concerned what that would look like. From the public hearing, we had a number, I think there's probably like 12 or so folks that were here asking questions, then I fielded calls. And so I think that the neighbors have been engaged. But as far as their personal feelings, I can't comment on that.
I feel like some of that, they thought they were going to have a massive mall setting in front of them for a long time. So this may be a nice transition to actually have some more residential housing.
Well, in regards to that, the route for the raise grant that the city just received goes through there, and so there's going to be some things that we have to be mindful of anyways to make it more pedestrian friendly and make this a development that is accessible regardless of if you're riding a bike, driving a car, walking, whatever.
All right, thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else to speak in favor of? Sir. You state your name and your address, please.
On property at 518 East 6th Street. I'm directly across from where you see the gray area. That's at the intersection of Central Layton Boulevard and East 6th Street. And I'm very aware of what's going to develop out there. That made us very aware. Only concern we really had for my family was the multifamily residential. What kind of quality is multifamily residential? There's areas to the north of that. They're not quite the most desirables. They've had a lot of problems, a lot of police reports. And I put my trust in Conway Development because we know how they have developed Conway. I'm a lifelong resident, lived to that location since 1965. So I know what they're capable of, but when you have a general layout like this, you kind of like to get a reassurance. We're putting in quality homes for the residential and quality multi-family structures. But I'm in favor of the project. I realize what it's going to do. It's a great opportunity the city of Conway has to develop this area. Thank you.
Thank you. Hang on, let me get. Is there anybody else to speak in favor of? All right, Corey, come on back and finish yours, and then we'll go to opposition.
So to his question on quality of the housing, I think the market will take care of that as far as being in proximity to some of these other uses. I think that it's going to require a premium. I think there's potential maybe to have something that's below market, but I think the mix of that would be way in the favor of something that's at market. And so I don't want to get into a multifamily conversation, but that would hopefully address that concern.
Thank you. Is there anyone to speak in opposition? Yes, sir. Please state your name and your address.
Jason Lyon, 2971 Eggman Lane. I guess with the caveat, it's not a full opposition to the whole project. I want to commend James and his staff because this PUD was a complete mess. All the amendments he's proposing are great. My concern is going to be the light industrial that's adjacent to the aquatic center. When this project came in back in 2014, the council was entertainment district, housing, mixed use. So this light industrial, potentially, right, especially right next to a new $35 million facility, may not look the best. But all the amendments, additional zoning, makes it looks really good. That's be the only concern. And then the taking out of warehousing is kind of cause of concern. If you could put mini storage or warehousing next to the new city facility that's being built. Now, knowing it is surrounded by I-3, but also it's an area of transition with the street department moving in the very near future. So that'd be my only concern. Otherwise, the amendments are great, and hopefully these projects will start working out for the Development Corporation.
Thank you. Is there anyone else to speak in opposition? Yes, ma'am. Please give us your name and your address.
And I'm not really going to say I'm for or against. I've got the article of when we were asked to vote on this bond, of what we were going to have, and things have changed again. When we first were asked to vote on the bond before, or the city was, we were going to have Dillard's, it was sold like that, and I'm still waiting on Dillard's, and I have not heard anybody say what happened to it. White House Black Market, all those stores. And as soon as that came out, I went down to White House Black Market in Little Rock, and I said, I hear y'all coming to Conway. It's news to us. Why was that ever published when none of that, my trust, and y'all, I'm sorry, it's like bait and switch. Get the people to vote for what we want in Conway, and then you switch it. Here again, this was presented, switching it again, and the gentleman that stood up here was explaining all this. I'm sorry, it's Greek, it's over my head, you're going to do what you want, but I think if this happens, there's too many ifs. And when Fontainebleau was coming, it was billed as a luxury apartments. So I went and I looked at them because I thought about downsizing, and I would have gone there, but not now, not knowing what's going to be out there. I don't want to sit up on my balcony and look over industrial and these multi-dwellings that Conway is packed full down East German Lane, and the planning that you talked about on Lower Ridge Road. That's getting disgusting out there. All you see is rooftops, and I'm sorry, but in 20 years, those houses are made so cheap, you've got slum areas coming. And a lot of people agree with me, and development like that should not be packed into Conway. And the east side is just getting worse. So I just hope whatever y'all do with this, it is nice, very nice. And honestly, I don't believe a hotel will ever come in there. I may be wrong, but whatever you do, I'm just tired of the bait and switch. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, ma'am. Anybody else in opposition? All right, let's bring this back into commission. You guys have any discussion or questions about anything? So my one question that I wrote down was concerning the light industrial use. James, can you tell us like what that could potentially look like?
It essentially would be consistent with I-1, I-1 development. I don't have the zoning code on me, so I apologize. Do y'all have your book? Sure, yeah, if you wanna.
I actually have it up too.
Mm-hmm. So according to this is basically saying everything would be a conditional use except unless it was a hotel, motel, or again, I don't know what like.
No, that's I-1. So the general description of the I-1 district is designed to provide a use area for wholesaling, storage, packaging, display, distribution, and those retail uses that are necessary to the operation and for light manufacturing, assemblage, and fabrication of a non-nuisance nature. Go to light. I'm sorry?
Yeah, come on up and give us examples of what's already around there.
So as I mentioned earlier, I-3 is predominantly the adjacent zoning for the industrial use. But Snap-on, for instance, is near this property and they assemble there. And so that would be, technically that would be in this, but I think they're probably zoned I-3. Douglas Companies is on that same stretch, and that's more warehousing and distribution for C-stores. And so that would, I would say, would be included in I-1. And so again, there's not really anything that's heavy, intense. And again, this would be focused on something that's going to be congruent with the surrounding uses, because if it's not, then that drives the property value down for the current development and then any future development.
All right, thank you. Does anybody have any other questions?
Let me now finally, yeah. Okay, so what is allowed by right is manufacturing light. That's a facility and surrounding yard designed to provide an area for wholesaling, storage, packaging, display, distribution, and those retail uses, accessory to operations and for light manufacturing, assemblage, and fabrication of a non-nuisance nature. Some examples would be baked goods, candy, bread, dairy, ice cream manufacturing. I would love to have Yarnell's, but it's probably not going to. They're sticking in Cersei, I'm sure. Book bindery, bottling works, carpentry, woodworking, furniture making, electrical equipment assembly, a dry ice plant, industrial cleaning plant, jewelry manufacturing, leather goods, fabrication, manufactured home, trailer sales service, which I think that's otherwise prohibited, oil field equipment and sales, optical goods manufacturing, outdoor advertising plant, processing and manufacturing that by reason of operation is not a nuisance in respect to odor, noise, dust, vibration, warehousing, wood distribution, and wood or lumber processing are examples of light industrial.
Questions from anybody?
Motion to approve staff recommendation.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstention? So that's one abstention. Letitia? Is that enough yeses without me voting?
Yes.
All right, motion is approved. I think we're getting close, people. Okay, so request to annex 1.99 acres as R1 at South Shore Lane.
Yes, this is at 48 South Shore Lane, which is just south of the lake there. Currently sitting on this lot is a single-family house and an accessory building. There's been no plans presented to change this configuration as of right now. They're requesting annexation into the city. They are requesting R1 zoning, which staff concurs with. It does comply with the requirements of the ordinance specifying procedures for annexation. There is one part of the ordinance that requires the property be platted before it is brought into the city. That has still not been accomplished, so we would recommend this be tabled until the platting process is complete.
discuss that, or is he looking for a motion to table?
You can speak to the applicant, but that's what our recommendation would be.
Yeah, I would proceed with the public hearing and.
All right, thank you. All right, is there anyone here to speak in favor of?
Bill Atkinson, I'm from 5880 Prince Street here in Conway. I'm an attorney and I represent Barbara Satterfield and Jim Volkert, who are the owners of this property. And Barbara, as many of you may know, is here and can answer any questions you may have of her if I'm unable to. This is a 2-acre tract that lies on the south shore of Lake Beaver Fork and right across the street from it's adjacent to Lake Shore Drive, or South Shore Drive. South Shore Drive, I think is the name. And right across the street from the existing city limits. And my clients would like to be in the city limits to achieve the benefits that would come from Conway Corporation and other city services, such as trash and fire protection. Water is probably, depending on with the history out there, water may be possible in the future, and they would love to have city water if they could get it, but that may not be the case. But they could enjoy the other benefits achieved from being in the city, and they certainly could enjoy the reduced insurance premiums from being in the city and having the city fire protection. I was not aware of the fact that there was a plat requirement with an annexation. But we have submitted one to Tyler Surveying and hope to have that soon. And I would ask, assuming the Planning Commission is willing to approve this request, that this not be tabled until the plat is submitted, but pass the approval subject to submission of an acceptable plat, so that we don't have to come back for another hearing, which would just be unnecessary in my view. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. If not, Barbara Satterfield is here if you have any questions of the landowner.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else here to speak in favor of?
Barbara Satterfield, and I live at 48 South Shore Lane. We really appreciate the opportunity to be annexed into the city and understand that we have some things that need to be addressed. Certainly do trust Bill Atkinson to negotiate for us, and we certainly want to provide the plat in a timely fashion. So we appreciate approval of the recommendations for annexation, whether it's tonight or if it's tabled next time.
Anyone else to speak in favor of? Any opposition? All right, commissioners, what do you want to do?
The sample motion in the packet seems to cover the contingent upon property being platted. Is that acceptable to staff?
Yes, I will note we did get some concern from Conway Corp this morning. So that remains, if it goes on at this point, it would go to council, but I know there is some concerns from the utility. I think surrounding the Beaver Fork issue.
Can you get into the concerns, or?
I think some of it relates to it annexing a portion of another utility service area. But again, that's.
But if we approve this and that runs into the issue, the whole thing is moot anyways, right?
It could be addressed at council. Yeah, fleshed out at council.
So if we table, once the issue is figured out, it's still going to have to go to council, right?
Right. Yeah, it has to go to council regardless.
My opinion would be, let's just send it.
Send it. Agreed.
Yeah, I mean, let's try to
do it.
help everybody. And if you can't get it, and come back here. But I mean, let's try to. Surely, I mean, I guess council can always send it back.
Good.
Maybe not. I don't know.
They could, yeah.
I mean, they could.
Mark already left.
I'll move to approve the request contingent upon the property being platted.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? All right, motion is approved. Have a good night. Request for conditional use permit of the publicly owned service facility and utility facility in A1 at South German Lane.
Yes, so this is a proposed new facility, service facility for Conway Corporation. That they are intending to relocate from their current location on Harkrider, which the city has purchased that property, so that lay that any potential conflict of interest that might exist out there, lay that on the table. With this, this is an allowed conditional use within an A1 zone. In looking at it on the comprehensive plan, this property sort of on the west side is listed as single family. On the east side, it's listed as industrial use. So in staff reviewing this, we saw this as kind of a good transitional use because they intend to have more office uses that have a better visual character on the west side and more utility yard uses on the east side, which have a more industrial character. So it felt like that was a very good sort of in terms of the visually how that appears. The traffic estimation for it, we estimate somewhere between 300 and 500 vehicle trips per day. That based on the current traffic on South German, which is about 5,500, wouldn't have a largely significant impact. I wouldn't call it minimal, but it would be a small impact. Portions of the site fall within the floodplain and also the 1% annual chance floodplain as well. So again, the site also borders to the west the proposed South German Lane Park / Powerline Park that's been termed. And so that helps mitigate the impact of the use. There's residential that's further to the north, and there's more residential that's further to the south. But in the future, there will not be residential directly to the west. That will be, future sort of recreational uses in terms of that. Location of the site will allow consolidation of utility facilities at Conway Corporation, which will be a benefit for the community. It can be considered somewhat compatible with the plan because it is that transition in terms of looking at it. The staff recommendation, we have those listed conditions there. We had some discussion earlier today with Conway Corporation. I think they had some issues. And so it's been staff's recommendation that we table this until next month so that we can continue to work out those conditions in an amenable way for both parties, because it is essentially a city-owned utility and kind of work those things out that these types of facilities have to go somewhere. And so work those conditions out. What we'd ask is continue the public hearing, go through the public hearing, table the item for next month, and then we'll bring back an amended list of conditions. So, also have to say, my kids have been sitting here through this entire meeting, and I'm so proud of them that they've been so
great.
extremely good this entire time. So I'm proud of them.
Y'all have any questions for James?
Y'all come back next month and I'll bring my kids and we'll see how they act. So
Right.
it won't be like that.
James, what did you bribe them with?
Switch time. Yeah. Nintendo Switch. Yeah, it works.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone to speak in favor of?
Joanna, you didn't have to wait at all, did you?
Joanna Napholtz, 1335 Brookfield Drive, and I'm here representing Conway Corp. We are the architect on this facility. It's a small portion of the whole, kind of their whole entire site. We did purposely put the building and the office building closer to South German to have that nice look. The only things we're still not questioning, but still want to have, we might need a meeting just on fencing, because security is very important to Conway Corp. And so we want it to look good, we want it to be appealing, but at the same time, it's got to be secure, especially with residents around, and not be able to get eyes on everything. So I think that's mostly all the rest of the conditions, right? Yes, good.
Are you good with it being tabled? Okay.
I mean, it'd be, yeah, yes.
Well, I mean,
I mean, if there's a way to, kind of group all the fencing ones together and say as approved by planning, that would work too.
Is there anyone else here to speak in favor of? Any opposing? All right, commissioners. Table, or do you want to vote?
I move to table.
Second.
All in favor of tabling?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Amen.
Great job, Laura.
I couldn't tell if she was asking for an adjournment or if she was.
I was.
I was trying to read your facial expression.
I was like, I think we're done. I want to make sure.
Is it Rebecca?